Hi, I'm Brittany. My stepmom kicked me out of my father's house the day after his funeral, said, "You were just his shadow." Then she sold his medals, emptied the accounts, and claimed I was never part of the will. But she didn't know he left me something she couldn't erase, and when I showed up in court, she wasn't just crying, she was begging. How did I go from being erased to being the only name that mattered? The air in Savannah that morning clung to my skin like a judgment, sticky, unmoving, and just uncomfortable enough to remind me I was walking into something I wouldn't forget. The driveway to my father's estate was lined with boxwoods cut too perfectly, like everything about this family, designed to appear intact, even when it was anything but. I stepped out of the Uber, smoothed my blouse, and took a breath that didn't help much. My heels clicked too loudly on the stone steps leading to the front porch. No one greeted me. That part didn't surprise me. They hadn't expected me to show. Inside, the foyer was already full of family I hadn't seen in months. Some, years. A few offered quick glances, then returned to sipping iced tea or pretending to scroll their phones. One of my cousins, Leland, walked by and muttered without looking at me, "You're here early. Brave of you." I didn't respond. There wasn't much to say. I wasn't here to play nice or reminisce about holidays that ended in backhanded comments and passive-aggressive wine refills. I was here because I'd been his daughter, every day, not just when the inheritance papers were ready. We were ushered into the sitting room, which had been rearranged to accommodate the formality of the will reading. Mahogany chairs faced a cherrywood desk where the attorney sat, glasses perched low on his nose. He cleared his throat. "This will," he began, "is the final and binding legal document prepared and signed by Mr. John Everett Locksley." I felt my hands tighten in my lap. He read names, nieces, nephews, an old business partner, a church. Then, her name. Vesper. Full inheritance, full control, full access, but not mine. Not even a mention. The room shifted like someone had dropped a pin on marble. My stomach hollowed. My father's attorney paused for breath, then folded the will and said, "These were Mr. Locksley's final instructions." I blinked, once, twice, but no tears came. I didn't give them that. Vesper tilted her head toward me with that practiced face of pity and surprise. "Oh, I thought he'd included something for you," she said with a soft hand over her chest, her voice just loud enough for those closest to hear. Behind me, a relative cleared his throat awkwardly. Someone else looked down at their shoes. Not one person said my name. "Sometimes," I remembered reading once, "the worst betrayals come from those you'd die for." I opened my mouth to speak, but the attorney looked away, shuffled his papers, and mumbled, "It was all reviewed and filed properly, Miss Locksley. There's nothing more to discuss." Later, after the room had scattered and the echo of fake condolences faded, I wandered down the hall toward the living room, the legacy wall, my father called it. He used to say the family pictures told our real history, but mine were gone. Where there had once been a photo of me on Dad's shoulders at the beach, now hung an abstract painting Vesper probably picked out, our father-daughter dance at my college graduation. Gone. The wall was polished, dust-free, and sterile. In the kitchen, I passed two cousins whispering, "Maybe it's better to stay quiet right now," one said, eyes darting when she saw me pass. I kept walking. I found the digital slideshow on a loop in the main room. Vesper's face flashed often. Her with Dad at charity dinners, cutting ribbons, playing doting spouse. But not a single frame of me. Not one. Something inside me, soft for too long, hardened. I thought about the long nights nursing Dad when he was too weak to eat. The grocery runs, the doctor calls, the arguments I had with nurses who were too rushed to care. And Vesper, she was usually working late or traveling for board matters, arriving just in time for photo ops. Was I just the help in this house? I knew how often in probate battles, especially in states like Georgia, non-biological caregivers were erased, intentionally. No legal documentation of my sacrifice meant it didn't count. I took a breath. I wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not now. By dinner, the back patio was full of laughter and wine glasses clinking. I didn't join. Instead, I overheard an uncle say, "It was Vesper who really held things together. Brittany was always around, but never took initiative." I stepped into what used to be my bedroom. It was a guest suite now. My things, paintings, books, and old sweater, were packed into a single box in the corner. A hotel robe hung on the door instead of the cardigan Dad bought me last Christmas. There was a note on the dresser, a Lyft voucher, in case you need a ride back to Atlanta. I didn't throw it away. I folded it, slid it into my purse. By nightfall, I sat alone in the garden Dad built just for me. A Japanese maple, his favorite tree, shaded the bench we once read under. The lights were dimmed, the air finally cooling, but my thoughts burned hot. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Mirabelle, Dad's old lawyer and the only person I trusted in this family mess. Something's not right. He wouldn't do this. I stared at the message, then hit send. Footsteps on gravel broke the quiet. Vesper appeared from the back door, a wine glass in hand. "You don't belong here anymore," she said softly. Not cruel, not loud, just certain. I stood, straightened my shoulders. My hand brushed the back of the bench one last time. "You may have the money," I said, my voice even, "but you don't own the truth." With that, I walked past her, down the stone path, suitcase rolling behind me. She didn't follow. As I stepped through the iron gate, the lights in the garden flickered off. The house was quiet again. Not the peaceful quiet that wraps around you like a soft blanket, but the kind that gnaws at the edges of your nerves, waiting for something to snap. Everyone had left after the reading, some quickly, some with lingering fake hugs, but no one asked me to stay. No one offered a ride, or a drink, or a reason to believe that I still belonged here. I lingered in the kitchen, poking at cold leftover potato salad that someone had shoved into a bowl without care. The refrigerator hummed louder than it should have. I sat at the breakfast bar, staring at the marble that Vesper insisted on installing when Dad got sick. Said it made the space look less clinical. It always felt cold to me. The housekeeper passed by with a tight smile, her arms full of linens. "Do you have somewhere to stay tonight, Ms. Loxley?" Her voice was quiet, but laced with something between pity and warning. I looked up, forcing a polite tone. "I'm working on it." She nodded, then disappeared down the hall. I texted Mirabelle, twice. No reply. I figured she was probably digging through documents, trying to make sense of what just happened. Every creak in the floor felt louder. Every framed picture I passed reminded me that I no longer existed here. It's funny how fast you can go from beloved daughter to unacknowledged guest. Someone once said, "You don't have to set someone on fire to know they're trying to burn you out." I felt every bit of that heat now. Around 11:30, I was still seated on the patio, trying to convince myself not to explode. That's when I heard the sharp sound of heels against the tile. Vesper. She stepped out with a glass of wine, her blouse still perfect, her makeup untouched by the emotions she pretended to have earlier. She didn't sit. She didn't greet me. "Let's make this simple," she said, voice steady. "You have until midnight." I turned my head slowly. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she replied, sipping. "There's no room for you here anymore. You made that clear by contesting what your father wanted." "I haven't contested anything," I said, standing up. "I haven't even had time to process what just happened." Vesper shrugged. "Regardless, this isn't your home. It hasn't been for a long time." I stared at her. "Because you decided that? Or because it's easier to erase me than admit what you did?" "You can call whomever you want," she said, now walking back toward the door. "But you won't be doing it from here." One of the staff members appeared awkwardly behind her, holding my suitcase. Another stood by the front door with a small box, the same one I saw in my old room. My life, reduced to 2 hands' worth of cardboard. As I stepped toward the foyer, I reached for the family photo album from the shelf near the piano. Vesper saw and moved quickly, grabbing it before I could. "That's not yours," she said flatly. I didn't argue. And not because she was right, but because she didn't deserve the fight. I took my things, walked past them all, her, the staff, the silence, and didn't look back. Outside, the night air wrapped around me. Heavy, still. I sat on the curb, waiting for the car they called. I pulled out my phone to distract myself. And that's when I noticed something. The Loxley Legacy group chat was gone. Not muted, not archived. Gone. I searched. Nothing. My heart hitched. Not from sadness, but from disbelief. I opened Instagram. One of my cousins had posted a boomerang from the brunch earlier, captioned, "Family first." I stared at it, then checked my messages. A DM from Leland. Vesper said it's best. Legal stuff. Hope you understand. Understand? I had no idea how to respond. I called my mother, let it ring once. Then I hung up. Grief used to mean missing someone. Tonight it felt more like being rewritten. The car ride was long. The driver didn't ask questions after. Rough night, huh? And I was grateful. I gave him an address to a cheap motel I remembered passing on the way to the hospital once. That's all I could afford now. I looked out the window the whole ride. Savannah at night was all Spanish moss and whispered regrets. I had nothing but a hoodie, the box at my feet, and $40 left. Dad's voice echoed in my head. You always land on your feet, baby girl. Maybe. But some landings leave bruises. The motel smelled like bleach and mildew. The receptionist barely looked up as she handed me the key. Inside the room, the faucet dripped steadily, the wallpaper curled near the baseboards, and the mattress groaned like it had opinions. I sat down and let myself feel everything for the first time. Not sadness, not despair, anger, and clarity. I grabbed the motel's notepad and started writing. Every date, every inconsistency from the will reading, names of witnesses, things Vesper said. The photo album, the family chat, the Lyft voucher. I wasn't going to sit in this room and disappear. If I wasn't in the story, I'd rewrite the story. Around 2:00 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. We need to talk. I stared at it, heart thudding. The name didn't show. But I recognized the area code. It was one of my cousins. Someone who hadn't said a word in years. I put the phone down, stood by the window, and stared out at the flickering street lamp. They wanted me gone. What they'll get is something they can't erase. I didn't sleep. My body had lain still for hours, but my mind circled the same questions like vultures waiting on the truth to drop dead. I stared at the ceiling until light crept through the frayed blinds of the motel window. My limbs were heavy, but I pulled myself up, still wearing yesterday's clothes, still clutching a notepad that now held a roadmap of betrayal. By 7:30, I was on the bus heading downtown. The seats were cracked vinyl, and the hum of the engine gave me something to focus on other than my thoughts. Savannah was waking up. Joggers, coffee lines, parents walking sleepy children into schoolyards. Life continued as if a daughter hadn't just been written out of her own father's life. In a world built by silence, truth screams louder than memory. I whispered that to myself, writing it down between to-do lists and half-baked plans. Mirabelle Crane. She had been Dad's lawyer for years, longer than Vesper had been in our lives. And though I hadn't spoken to her in months, she was the only person I trusted to tell me the truth, even if it hurt. Her office was still above the old consignment bookstore on Whitaker Street. The stairs creaked the same way they did when I was a teenager running up to tell her about my first college acceptance letter. The door had her nameplate, peeling a little, but still there. Still her. She opened the door before I knocked. Brittany. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried too much. She stepped aside, motioned me in, then locked the door behind us. We didn't hug. It wasn't that kind of moment. I heard about the will, she said, leading me to a pair of chairs near the window. You didn't know? I wasn't allowed to know. I was dismissed from his legal service 3 weeks before he passed. Officially, they said it was for health privacy, but we both know what that means. I nodded. Vesper. Mirabelle sighed. I couldn't fight her without proof. And your father, well, he stopped answering my calls the last week. It wasn't like him. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, worn keychain. I believe this was yours once, she said, placing it in my palm. I stared at it. A metal tag, scratched on the edges, engraved with our initials, BJ. I gave this to him when I was 10, said it was so he'd never lose me. Mirabelle met my eyes. Check it. Your father wasn't one to leave things to chance. I turned it over in my hand, feeling something odd in its weight. A faint click. Inside was a tightly folded paper and a micro USB drive, thin and tucked so perfectly I'd have missed it if I hadn't known it was there. My hands trembled. Is this what I think it is? Mirabelle's face didn't change. Don't open it here. I left with shaking legs and a pulse loud enough to drown the traffic. The nearest cafe was 3 blocks down. I ordered the cheapest coffee and slipped into the single-stall restroom, locking the door behind me. Pulling the USB from its casing, I plugged it into my phone using a borrowed charger. The screen lit up with a single file, revised will bjl.pdf. I opened it. My father's signature, Mirabelle's witness line. Dated 3 months before he died. I scrolled through. He had left 30% of the estate to me. Specified clauses for legacy trusts. Mentioned the community center we'd discussed. My name appeared 6 times. He tried to protect me, and they buried it. I took photos of every page, emailing them to myself, Mirabelle, and a cloud backup. Then I folded the paper and tucked it into my wallet. My heart wasn't racing, it was sharpening. I walked out and called Mirabelle from the sidewalk. If I take this to court, will you testify? If you can prove coercion, she said, I'll stand behind you. I sat on a bench and pulled my notebook out again. Names poured onto the page. Caregivers, nurses, aides, the housekeeper. Everyone who saw Dad those final months. I wrote questions beside each. Did they see anything? Was Vesper always alone with him? I also made note of Georgia's probate rules. I knew enough to know that handwritten or digital drafts, especially with a witness and date, weren't nothing. And Savannah courts, like most, hated being lied to. I was building a case, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. By noon, I was walking toward the house, not for a dramatic entrance, but to see someone, a caregiver named Fran who'd helped Dad toward the end. She'd been kind, gentle, and she had no allegiance to Vesper. I didn't even make it past the gate. A security guard stepped forward. Ma'am, you're not allowed on the property. I'm here to see Fran. He shook his head. You're on a no-entry list. I was told not to make exceptions. I squinted. You were told by Vesper. I don't take names. Just follow orders. Behind him, I noticed the new keypad. The cameras were repositioned. The landscaping was tighter, more controlled. I stepped back, keeping my voice even. Okay, I said. You locked me out. Watch me break in without stepping through your door. As I walked back toward the street, the sun hit the corner of my phone screen, catching an incoming email. Subject: regarding the signature date discrepancy. I opened it. The sender: an address I didn't recognize, but the name below it stopped me. A paralegal. From my father's estate firm. The message was short. We need to talk. Some things aren't adding up. I stared at it, feeling the first true wave of hope in days. Looks like someone else is done being quiet. By late afternoon, the motel room had grown too tight with thoughts I couldn't shut off. I needed air. Not just oxygen, but answers. Every instinct in me said Vesper wasn't waiting for legal clearance to act like she'd won. I needed to know if she had already started moving pieces behind the scenes, spending money that wasn't legally hers to spend. My gut told me yes. My father's money didn't sleep, and neither did her ambition. I walked into the same bank where my dad used to greet every teller by name. It still smelled like lemon-scented cleaner and worn carpet. I recognized the woman at the far left station, Maria. She smiled faintly, but something in her eyes flickered when she saw me. Hi there, I said, stepping up like I was just another daughter running errands. Quick question. Has anyone been in recently asking about my father's accounts? Maria glanced around. Ms. Loxley. I probably shouldn't say much. I leaned forward, keeping my voice casual. You don't have to give me specifics. I just want to know if Vesper's been by. She hesitated. She was here this morning. I kept my expression flat. And? She tried to access a few things. Couldn't. Something's frozen. A small, tight smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Interesting. Maria lowered her voice. It's not common for estate accounts to get flagged that quickly unless there's a dispute. Are you challenging the will? Not officially, I said, pulling my bag onto my shoulder. But I'm keeping receipts. She gave me a slow nod. Then keep asking questions. As I stepped out into the humid air, a thought echoed louder than the traffic. Money talks, but not when it's been gagged by legal paperwork. I didn't go back to the motel right away. I hopped on the city bus, still thinking about Maria's warning. The wheels of my brain spun faster than the tires beneath me. I pulled out my phone, just to scroll and distract myself, when I saw it, an ad on Facebook Marketplace, vintage pocket watch, engraved backplate, $150. The listing was from someone named V. Augusta 72. I tapped the photo. My breath caught. It was his. The same gold watch my father wore every day of my childhood. The back had his initials etched, slightly worn but still clear. She was selling it, like it meant nothing. Like it was just stuff. I sent a message to the seller. Hi, interested in this. Is it still available? No reply. I clicked her profile. More listings. Books from my dad's office. The bound collection of Roosevelt's speeches I gave him when I got my first raise. His golf set, still tagged limited edition. War medals, framed certificates, photos. Each item broken from its story, posted as if memory could be priced. You don't sell legacy. You protect it. I took screenshots of everything. I noted timestamps, compared them to the day of the will reading. She hadn't even waited 24 hours. I called Mirabelle. If I can prove she's liquidating heirlooms, intentionally dismantling inheritance, does that help? Her voice tightened. Absolutely. That's destruction of estate property and emotional damage, depending on the jurisdiction. I sat back, staring at the screen. My father's entire life was being chopped into bite-sized sales and handed off to strangers. And no one would know unless I screamed it into the world. I stepped off the bus 3 stops early and walked. I needed time to calm the fire burning behind my ribs. I wandered into a nearby park, one I hadn't been to in years, and found the old wooden bench Dad and I used to sit on after doctor's appointments. He once told me, after I'd failed a class in college and cried about it for days, the value of a thing isn't what it's worth, it's who kept it safe. I didn't cry now. I wanted to. I wanted to fall apart, but the anger tasted stronger than sorrow. I pulled my pen out and jotted down every name I could remember from that house. Housekeeper, nurse, landscaper, Vesper's assistant. Maybe someone had kept something. Maybe someone saw what she tossed and saved it, not knowing its worth. Maybe not, but I had to try. That night, I sat by the motel window, legs tucked under me, eyes scanning my phone. Still no reply to my earlier message. Until one blinked in. Still available. Can meet tomorrow. 5:00 p.m. Cross streets, Pine and Holland. No name, just the meetup. I clicked the profile again. Still set to public. A new listing had just gone up. Cufflinks, worn by CEO John Loxley. $60. The seller had no idea who I was, but I knew exactly who she worked for. I set my phone down, exhaled slowly, and whispered to the empty room. One step closer. I dressed deliberately. Nothing too loud, but not forgettable either. Slate gray slacks, soft cotton blouse, silver studs. Subtle, calculated. I needed to look like a woman who knew what she was doing, even if everything inside me was chaos. In my pocket was a flash drive with every piece of evidence I'd collected so far. My phone held screenshots, timestamps, names. I rehearsed the questions I'd ask and the tone I'd use, measured, not angry. The bus ride was short. As we turned onto Oak Ridge Avenue, my fingers tapped the flash drive rhythmically in my pocket. Every house I passed used to be part of a memory. Halloween walks, neighborhood barbecues, weekends mowing the lawn. Now, they were just backdrops in someone else's performance. I got off 2 blocks before the meeting point, walked the rest of the way to center myself. Dignity isn't about how you walk in, it's how you walk out when they slam the door, I muttered under my breath, a mantra I needed more than ever. When I reached the address, an empty commercial lot Vesper's assistant had picked for the watch exchange, I stood waiting under the overhang. 5 minutes passed before I saw her. Paige, Vesper's assistant. She wore sunglasses even though the sun had already dipped. She clutched a brown paper bag and looked uncertain as she approached. "Hi," I said calmly. Her eyebrows lifted. "Oh, I didn't realize it was you." "You didn't check the name?" I tilted my head. "You're selling John Loxley's pocket watch, Paige. You didn't think his daughter might recognize it?" Her mouth opened, but no words came. "I'd like to know," I continued, "why you think it's appropriate to list my father's heirlooms like yard sale junk." Paige's voice was thin. "She said you forfeited everything, that you weren't family anymore. I didn't—" I cut her off, stepping forward. "Where are the rest of his things? The cufflinks? His war medals?" A sudden noise behind me made us both turn. The security guard from the house stepped out of a parked SUV. "Miss Loxley," he said, "you've been warned not to approach the property." "I'm not on the property." "You're within 100 feet. That's enough." I felt my chest tighten. A low rumble of thunder rolled over the horizon, and within seconds, rain began falling. Not a drizzle, but a full-on downpour. The guard reached out to open the SUV door for Paige. She shoved the bag at me. "Take it. I don't want it." As she climbed into the car, I stood there in the rain, the bag now soaked and softening in my hands. The guard moved toward me again. "I suggest you leave," he said. I didn't respond. Just stood there, drenched, watch in hand, my father's name etched on the backplate. A single phrase crystallized in my head. "You can't erase me if I refuse to disappear." Back at the motel, after changing into dry clothes, my phone lit up. A voice message, unknown number. I played it, holding the phone close. "Hi. You don't know me. I used to work with Vesper at her PR firm. She's done this before. Spinning narratives, deleting online history, planting sympathetic articles. You're not crazy, you're just inconvenient to her." My eyes stayed fixed on the screen. "She once said, 'You control the story, you control the truth.' I quit after that. Just thought you should know." I saved the message, then played it again, letting each word soak in. I opened my timeline document and added a new section, External Testimonies. Then I opened Facebook and archived every photo of my dad that included her. Vesper's version of him. I couldn't post it yet. But when I did, it would be loud. The next morning, I requested to meet one of my cousins, Amanda, who still attended Vesper's social brunches and always tried to play both sides. We met at a diner, middle of the day, in public. I brought a folder. Amanda greeted me with hesitant politeness. We ordered coffee. I pulled out the photos, one of the listings, one of the watch in my hand, one of the foundation's funds transferred the same day as the will reading. "I know you're not blind," I said. "You see what she's doing." Amanda tried. "I don't know enough to take sides." I leaned forward. "That's convenient, but ignorance isn't neutral. You either say something now or you get used to the taste of silence." She scanned the documents. "This is bad," she admitted. "But you know how she is. She makes people scared to cross her." And I'm not people. When we stood to leave, I said one last thing. "Tell her. I'm not done." Back in the motel, I pulled up my private account, started typing. A photo of me at 5, Dad holding me on his lap, the watch shining on his wrist. Caption: "Some memories aren't for sale, they're for justice." I saved the post as a draft. Beside it, I wrote a quote in my notes. "The strongest weapon isn't anger, it's precision." Just before midnight, my phone rang. Blocked number. I answered. A voice, male, low, scared, spoke. "She changed the will after his last stroke." I was there. I didn't flinch. "I need you to repeat that," I said. "On the record." I woke up to the voice note still playing in my head. "She changed the will after his last stroke." I was there. I hadn't slept. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Vesper guiding my father's hand with a pen like she was forging his life away. I sat at the edge of the bed, phone in hand, rereading the message I sent hours earlier. Then, the phone buzzed. A name flashed on the screen. Deborah S. I answered. Deborah? Yeah. You said you wanted to meet? Her voice was soft but tired. I can do 15 minutes. Coffee shop on River Street. I can't be seen, okay? I'll be there. By the time I arrived, she was already seated in the corner booth, her uniform half covered by a zip-up hoodie. She looked around constantly, like someone on the verge of turning back. Her fingers trembled slightly when she reached for her coffee. I wasn't supposed to say anything, she started, voice barely above a whisper. But I was there. That day. The day he signed the last will? I asked, leaning in. She nodded. He didn't know what day it was, barely recognized me. She kept telling him it was routine. Deborah pulled out her phone and handed it to me. I took this, for myself, in case I got blamed. The image was blurry, but the timestamp was clear. Vesper was holding a pen to my father's hand. His eyes were distant, his mouth slack. He wasn't signing anything. He was being used. I got fired 2 days later. She made me sign an NDA, said I breached protocol. Deborah, I said, placing her phone down gently. That picture could change everything. I know. I just didn't want it to ruin me. It's already ruining someone, and it's not you. Her final words before leaving stuck with me. He didn't even know what day it was. She made him sign it anyway. As I walked down the street, my fingers tightened around the strap of my purse. My father had been fading in those last few weeks. But the idea that someone would exploit that, would take the hands that once held mine through every storm and guide them into betrayal, ignited something I hadn't let myself feel yet. Rage. I didn't go back to the motel. I followed a different lead. One that had landed in my inbox last night. A pawn shop off Abercorn. A man who remembered a woman with blonde curls and designer sunglasses pawning off items from a CEO's estate. Inside, the shop was dim and cluttered, like time hadn't moved since 1993. Behind the glass counter, amidst tangled gold chains and scratched-up watches, sat something that knocked the breath from my lungs. My father's fountain pen. The same one engraved with the company's name, gifted to him after 20 years of service. I remembered watching him sign my school papers with it. He used it like a badge of honor. The owner saw my stare. Came in last week. Said she was clearing out an estate. I'd like to buy it, I said, reaching into my wallet, handing over most of what I had left. He wrapped it carefully. Hell of a pen. No, I replied. Hell of a man. Outside, I stood with the bag in hand, staring at the sidewalk like it had answers. I pulled out my phone, snapped a picture of the receipt and the pen, then added it to my digital archive. Every scrap mattered now. Later that day, I sat in the motel, blinds half drawn, papers spread around me like puzzle pieces. I emailed everything, Deborah's image, the receipt, my notes, to Mirabelle. Her reply came quickly. This is grounds for contesting, undue influence. But you only get one chance to reveal this. Make it count. I took that to heart. I opened a fresh document. Title, Timeline of Manipulation. I started at the beginning. Dates, transactions, family meetings, asset transfers, cross-referencing news articles, Facebook posts, obituary edits. Every lie I could prove, I logged. Then I backed it all up to a cloud folder, encrypted it, shared access with 2 people I trusted outside my family. They erased me from one document. I'm about to write a dozen they'll never forget. I needed fresh air. I walked the 5 blocks to the community garden Dad had supported for years. It was tucked behind a church, flanked by raised beds and trellises weighed down with tomatoes and squash. An old man stood watering a row of basil. He looked up as I passed. John Loxley's girl, right? I nodded, startled. He used to bring me tomatoes, said grocery store ones tasted like nothing. I smiled, warmth blooming under the weight of the day. Yeah, he said that a lot. He waved me toward a wooden sign at the garden's entrance. I hadn't noticed it before. It read, "In honor of John Loxley's unwavering generosity." My throat tightened. She could sell the watch, the pen, even the house, but she couldn't sell who he was. As I walked back toward the motel, phone buzzing again, I felt different. Not calmer, but centered, stronger. Then the buzz turned into a chime. Court alert. Petition filed. I tapped the screen. Plaintiff, Vesper Loxley. Defendant, Brittany Loxley. Allegations: defamation, intentional interference. My thumb hovered. She was suing me. Not warning, not threatening. Acting. I stared at the screen, then looked up at the stretch of sky above me. Let's go then. I sat in the courthouse hallway with a copy of Vesper's petition in one hand and a headline from that morning in the other. The paper had run a tabloid-style piece that used the words ungrateful, unstable, and opportunist in bold font under a photo of me from 2 years ago, one taken at a family gathering I hadn't even wanted to attend. The caption: "The daughter who challenged a dying man's final wishes." The article painted me as a scheming daughter who had tried to manipulate a dying father for his money. Even worse, it included specific dates, conversations, and phrases that only someone in the family could have known. I didn't need a detective to guess where the leaks came from. I leaned back against the wall and whispered to myself, if she's throwing mud, she must feel the ground slipping. The mud kept coming. Later that afternoon, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Tom, a coworker from my old firm. "Hey," he said, his voice hesitant. "Just a heads up. HR got an anonymous tip claiming you mishandled financial data at your last role. They're not acting on it, but they flagged it." I stood by the motel window, gripping the edge of the curtain. Anonymous, huh? Look, I know it's garbage, but someone's trying to shake your tree. She's trying to salt the ground so nothing grows back, I muttered. Thanks for letting me know. Take care of yourself, Britt. After hanging up, I opened my browser and found the article again, this time with an update. Someone had added a correction stating I'd been caught shoplifting in high school. I hadn't. It was entirely fabricated. Furious but composed, I walked to the local paper's office and requested a meeting with the editor. He greeted me like he didn't expect me to show up. "That piece you ran on me?" I asked. "Care to explain your source?" He glanced down, then shrugged. "We received a packet. Documents, statements, timeline, all labeled and credible looking." "From who?" He didn't flinch. "Your stepmother is a very convincing source." I nodded slowly. "She's good at illusions, just not as good at hiding the strings." On the way out, I took a detour to the public archive building. I wasn't there for therapy. I was hunting records, old court filings, estate disputes, anything that could tie into Vesper's pattern of manipulation. That's where I met Carlene. She was sitting near the copier, flipping through a folder. Her face lit up when I said my last name. "John's daughter?" she asked. "You knew him?" "I knew your mom. We were in college together. She told me everything back then." "Back then?" She closed her folder and leaned in. "You know Vesper wasn't just some new flame. She and your father were together long before the divorce was final. Your mother found out through a photo." I didn't speak. "She never showed it to you?" I shook my head. Carlene reached into her bag, pulled out a faded photograph, and slid it across the table. It was Vesper and my father at a charity gala, arms around each other, laughing. The date stamp was over a year before the divorce. She broke us before I ever knew I had a choice. The next morning, I walked into a private family brunch being hosted at a country club near the outskirts of Savannah. I wasn't invited. I didn't care. I walked past the valet, past the startled waitress, and directly to the long table where cousins, in-laws, and family friends sat eating eggs Benedict and sipping mimosas. I dropped a manila envelope in the center of the table. "You should read this." Inside were the photos, the article retractions, a signed statement from Carlene, and a side-by-side comparison of Vesper's court filings versus financial transfers she'd made. My cousin Melissa looked up first. "What is this?" "The truth," I said. "Why now?" another asked. "Because none of you said anything before, so I am now. Vesper wasn't there. I didn't need her to be." One cousin picked up the folder, flipped through, and left without a word. I turned before they could speak again. "If you stand by a liar, you inherit her shadow." I walked out. My heels echoed louder than their whispers. That evening, I found myself back at a park my parents used to take me to when I was a kid. I sat on the same bench where Dad once told me, "Family isn't who shares your name, it's who protects your truth when you can't speak it." I thought I understood that then. I didn't. Not until now. I pulled out a pen and started writing. Not legal arguments or timelines, just truth. The title, Inheritance of Silence. I saved it. For the right moment. As I packed up to leave the archive center, an elderly volunteer stopped me. "You're Brittany Loxley?" "Yes." She held out a cream-colored envelope. "Your father left this. Told me to give it to you if you ever came looking." My fingers trembled as I took it. His handwriting was clear, deliberate. To Brittany. I stared down at it, heart pounding. This changes everything. It was a forwarded email from my cousin Melissa that lit the fuse. Subject: You're going to want to see this. Attachment: Loxley Foundation. Gala invitation. I opened it, expecting more recycled photos or phony memorial press, but there it was. Vesper, front and center, glowing like a resurrected queen. The event was set to take place at the landmark ballroom, a space she once called gaudy when my father considered it for a retirement celebration. Now it was the stage for her self-coronation. The invitation listed the event's purpose as a celebration of legacy and leadership, with Vesper presenting her vision for the future of the Loxley name. A foundation dinner, hosted with funds still under probate. "She's dressing herself in a dead man's skin," I whispered. I didn't flinch. I didn't panic. I planned. I called Mirabelle. "Do you still have that tech guy? The one who helped with your property dispute?" "Eli? Yes." "You want in?" "Tell him I need 2 screens, 1 redirect server, and an audience." By the time the night of the gala arrived, everything was in place. The ballroom was filled with white linen, crystal, and carefully curated legacy. Waiters moved like shadows, the wine poured freely, and flashes from photographers painted the night in glitz. Vesper wore a sapphire dress that matched the centerpiece roses, probably hand-picked for drama. I entered quietly, in a dark navy suit. No heels, no smile. Just resolve. I kept to the back of the room, slipping behind the large projection screen where Eli was stationed. We exchanged a quick nod. When Vesper stepped onto the stage and cleared her throat, Eli whispered, "Your cue." Vesper began. "When John passed, he left us more than memories. He left us a duty, to continue the work he started. Today, I honor that promise." Click. The screen behind her flickered, then shifted. A title flashed. "The Truth They Buried." Gasps rippled. The slideshow showed a timeline, bank records with suspicious transfers, the pawnshop listings, and a blurry photo of Vesper guiding my father's hand to sign a document. Her voice cracked. "I don't... Turn it off!" But the tech team wasn't hers tonight. The final image paused mid-frame. My father's face, pale and distant, while Vesper held the pen. Then came the audio. From Alexa. "She keeps pushing papers at me. I don't understand them anymore. I want Brittany to have the garden." Silence. You could hear someone's fork drop. Vesper stepped away from the mic, her hands trembling. That's fake. Edited, deep-faked." I walked into the light. "No," I said. "It's truth. You just hoped no one would listen." She stared at me, pale now beneath the stage lights. Her lips moved, but nothing came out. Then she turned, quick, sharp, and disappeared backstage. One of the board members, Mrs. Dalton, a sharp woman in her 70s, stood and quietly gathered her things. As she passed me, she leaned in. "We'll be in touch." Cameras turned, phones rose. The quiet shift of support was louder than applause. I didn't chase Vesper. I didn't need to. Sometimes, the loudest answer is the one you don't shout. People came up after. Some nodded, some apologized, some just stared. It didn't matter. None of this had been for them. Later that night, back at the motel, I sat with my laptop on my knees. I uploaded the full video, added every document, every clip, every timestamp. The title, "When Blood Is Not Enough, What My Father Tried to Protect." The post went live. The first email came in 3 minutes later. My stepmom did the same. Thank you for giving this a name. Another followed, and another. They poured in. People who had been silenced, sidelined, gaslit. I added a letter to the post. This isn't about revenge, it's about voice. Because silence helps no one, and legacy deserves truth. I ended the post with a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. Justice cannot be for one side alone, but must be for both. I closed the laptop. The room was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't suffocating. My phone buzzed. I answered. There was a pause. Then a voice I recognized. Not the sound, but the weight behind it. I didn't know she'd go that far. Can we talk? I sat up straighter. Who is this? It's Paige. I used to work for Vesper. I woke to my phone vibrating violently against the nightstand. It wasn't an alarm. It was the avalanche. Notifications flooded in. Emails, texts, news alerts, DMs from people I hadn't spoken to in years. All of it converging on one point. The truth had landed, and it didn't go quietly. The gala video had gone viral. My inbox was a patchwork of affirmation and fury. Local stations had picked it up first, then regional press, then a handful of legal bloggers known for sniffing out scandal in old money families. And now, here it was, front page headline, Widow or Wolf, the battle for the Locksley legacy. I scrolled through the comments. Some praised me, others doubted. A few trolls surfaced, of course. There's always someone who'll defend a lie if it's dressed well enough, but their noise drowned under a rising tide of support. I threw on a hoodie and headed to the coffee shop across from the courthouse. As I waited in line, a woman approached. Maybe late 50s, silver bob, kind but wary eyes. You're Brittany, aren't you? I nodded. She looked around, then leaned in. You said what we were all too scared to say. Thank you. I didn't know what to say, so I just said, You're welcome. And then, the nail hit the coffin. A video surfaced on Twitter from a boutique mall lounge, time-stamped the day after my father's funeral. There was Vesper, laughing in a leather chair, sipping champagne with two younger women. She was trying on a diamond necklace, tossing her head back like grief was an inconvenience. The salesgirl had clearly filmed it on her phone. The caption read, This is what grief looks like when you think you've already won. Within minutes, it had thousands of views. Within the hour, Vesper's name trended. By mid-afternoon, donors were pulling out of the foundation. One issued a public statement. We supported legacy, not leverage. We are no longer affiliated with the Locksley Foundation. A blocked number lit up my screen just before 4 p.m. I picked up. Brittany. The voice was small, frayed, wet with something between desperation and shame. Vesper. I didn't think it would go this far, she whispered. You don't understand what it's like to lose everything. I stayed quiet. I was protecting what your father built. Still nothing. Please, just stop. Take the video down. We can talk, privately. You think this is about revenge? I said finally, steady and slow. I'm not doing this to ruin you. You're doing that on your own. Click. That night, I sent a full package to the probate attorney handling my father's estate. It included Deborah's sworn statement, a high-resolution image of the coerced signature, transaction records from the pawn shop audio from the Alexa device. The original unsigned will draft with witness marks. Mirabelle replied within the hour. Filed. Hearing requested. Good work. I stared at her message for a moment, then added the documents to a separate email thread addressed to every journalist who had ever asked me for a comment and hit send. No more whispers. By the next morning, the foundation's website was offline. The homepage now redirected to a single message, site under re-evaluation. A few hours later, I received an unexpected email from a name I hadn't seen in a long time. Ethan Swan, one of my father's longtime business partners. We'd had a strained relationship over the years, mostly due to his blind loyalty to Vesper. The message was short. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Comments flooded my social accounts. My aunt did this to me too. My mom's second husband rewrote her will. I never said anything. Thank you for being brave enough for all of us. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Not yet. But I began compiling the messages, categorizing them. Building a document that would soon become something bigger. Maybe a newsletter. Maybe a book. Maybe a space where other voices could be louder than their silencing. Then came the call from the Savannah Tribune. We'd like to run an exclusive. The woman who took back her name. I took a deep breath, looked around the motel room I hadn't had time to leave, and finally said, yes. As the sun dipped behind the Spanish moss outside, I backed up all my files one last time, organized them, encrypted them, uploaded them. A chime. Database alert. I checked the email. Suspicious login detected on a state account. I clicked the link. User. Vesper Loxley IP location, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. She was still trying, still reaching for what was slipping faster than she could control. I opened a new message to Mirabelle. Typed, she's still playing. Then hit send.